The focus of this video is the use of interactive notebooks, or as I call them, INBs, in unit planning. As a middle school teacher, my purpose for using interactive notebooks in my math classroom is twofold. First, it serves as a way for students to keep organized and have all the materials, steps, and procedures they need in order to solve problems, all in one central, convenient location. Each student in my middle school math classes has and constructs and is responsible for their own interactive notebook. When they're solving problems in class, they have this resource, but even more importantly, they have it when they go home and can use it to help them solve homework problems. The second purpose for these notebooks is that they allow me as a teacher to have a visual, tangible way to see the unit mapped out. One of the biggest benefits that I've seen using these interactive notebooks is that they guide and help me to make a more logical sequence in unit planning. So the unit that I am focusing on in this video is an 8th grade algebra unit. The goal for the unit is that students will be able to write and solve linear equations fluently, including real-world representations. So here I have sectioned off in our table of contents the different lessons within different units. So students will record the page number as well as the lesson topic in their own table of contents. We are focusing in this section here, pages 15 through 22, on solving equations and writing equations. Before each lesson, students write down the important vocabulary in their words worth knowing or a vocab section of their INBs. This helps us to use more math vocabulary and academic language when we're discussing the topic at hand. Math is certainly its own language, so laying out definitions, examples, and even non-examples have proven to be really helpful for my students. To begin this unit, I started with an overview of solving one-step equations. This is something that I know students have experience with in previous lessons and in previous years. The left side of our page of the interactive notebooks are our input or knowledge page. For this page, students have a foldable on the steps to solving one-step equations. The foldable lays out all the steps as well as examples of each problem type when solving one-step equations. The right-hand side of our interactive notebooks are our output page, or the show what you know page. It's where we take the skills that we learned on the left side, or our input page, and apply them to situations, often word problems, on the right-hand side. So from there, I knew we needed to build up to solving two-step equations, but first, students need to recognize how to combine like terms. We took notes differently than we did previously. Instead of using a foldable, we had guided notes that included definitions, examples, non-examples, and practice problems on how to combine like terms. The output for this section was an activity in which students had to choose the correct answer when combining like terms to get to the next correct problem. So finally, we build up to solving two-step equations. We used another foldable to go over each of the steps that could come up when solving two-step equations. I began with a somewhat complex equation, and I took student volunteers to see how could we solve this problem. And through discussion and guidance, we came up the steps that we would need to do in order to solve this problem to get our variable by itself. The great thing that I found about this foldable was that students know that they can skip steps if the equation does not require something. For example, not every equation will require students to use the distributive property, so they know they can skip that step and go on to the next one. So after practicing, we used our knowledge then for tougher questions on our output page. I made these problems higher level analysis type questions that would be similar to the types of questions they could be asked to solve on the state standardized tests later in the year. Finally, The last pages in the notebook for this unit are on writing algebraic expressions and equations. The input for this lesson focused on going over and identifying the different terms in an equation or an expression. We talked about what these words would mean in terms of a word problem. What would a coefficient mean in a word problem? How would we know to identify a variable? What operation would we need to use? And what about the constant? What would that represent? We then did some practice problems where we took words that would signal math action words and put them into algebraic expressions or equations. The unit then culminated with some tough level output questions. These are the types of questions that would appear on their state testing at the end of the year. It culminated with these practice problems because these are the questions that they will see to apply the skills that they have learned that we have built up to in the previous lessons, using all their skills to answer these questions that relate to solving and writing two-step algebraic equations. The great part about these output pages, or the right side pages, is that I can easily incorporate skills from other units, because students can easily reference previous pages in their INBs if necessary. For example, these equations have to do with multiplying, adding, and subtracting decimals. They have a page on that in previous pages and units in their INBs. So in summary, students have been using these interactive notebooks, and I've seen them perform much better on these analysis higher level type problems than if we were practicing in isolation. So we've been building up the skills, and students have resources to solve these problems, and I've seen them performing much higher. These interactive notebooks serve not only as a useful tool for students, but also as a practical way to organize unit plans for teachers.